Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies for that. We are back. We've spoken to to Mr. Soper, and the issue is now resolved. So thank you very much for your patience. Very much appreciated. Here we go. We're going to crack on now. My apologies for some audio issues there. Here we go. We're ready. We're good to go. My name's Rich. I run the Hard Compound. We're a page. We do news and articles, and we support young drivers as well. And eventually, we get round to doing live interviews. We've spoken to the likes of Ari Lyondike, double Indy 500 winner. We've also spoken to Derek Warwick, F1 driver, winner of 24 Hours of Le Mans. Just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had the honour and the privilege of speaking with Mario Andretti, which was absolutely fabulous. Just last week, we spoke to John Cleland, which was terrific. And there's a bit of a link to tonight's guest with John, as you'll know. We also spoke with Dick Bennett, which was fantastic. Last year, we spoke to Matt Neal, Michael Crease, Jade Edwards, Ollie Jackson, Brad Philpott, spoke to Louise Goodman, Tom Coronel, Rob Gravitt, lots of people. All the videos are on our Facebook page, are on our Twitter and on our YouTube. But on to tonight. We've kept you waiting long enough, and again, my apologies for that. So without further ado, we're going to bring in Mr. Steve Soper.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening,
Steve,
Rich.
good evening. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Wonderful. Right. Again, Steve, my apologies for that. Not entirely sure what happened there, whether it was my end, your end, or somewhere in the middle, but thank you for bearing with us.
No problem.
No problem. Excellent. So first, Steve, how are you, apart from interview delays?
I'm very good, actually, despite we've been in this strange world that we live in at the moment. I sort of get by, and I've so far so good. No coronavirus. My oldest daughter's had it, but the rest of the family are good. So I'm old enough. I've had the first vaccine, or I've had one of the vaccines anyway. I'm waiting the second one, but life is good.
Excellent. No, good. I was just sorry to hear that your oldest daughter's had it. I've had it myself, and it's not particularly pleasant. It just goes to show that with all the best will in the world, we can still pick these things up. So here we are. But yes, glad all is well. Yes, finally we can get cracking. We've already spotted that a certain Mr. Cleland has made a little remark about things, so I'm sure he'll pop up again later. But so what we like to do with these kind of chats, we just like to sort of have a quick run through the career, really, have a chat about some of the cars, the series, the drivers, few tales, that kind of a thing, all very informal. And hopefully everyone's going to enjoy it. So firstly, how did your path into motorsport come about? Was it something you were already interested in when you were younger?
Yeah, I suppose as a kid, I was. My father was very into motorsport and did some sprints and rallying and some odd race Silverstone 8 clubs and stuff like that. So from an early age, I was dragged along. Probably when I was very young, I didn't want to be there, but obviously once I became 10, 11, 12, then I got into it, and then it was in the genes, and off I went, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Right. That's good. It's always good to hear how people start their journeys. We've heard so many different stories. Some do it by accident, some always wanted to, and some were just born into it. You know, we spoke to Derek Warwick; he was always born into it. So, no, it's a nice place to start. Obviously, we've got a few notes here. I mean, we've got a career run through, which could take a while. There's plenty of plenty that you've done. It's obviously it seems to start in earnest 1982, the British Touring Car Championship. How did that all come about?
Well, that's probably when it kicked off. I mean, obviously I'd been racing. I think I started when I was 13, 14, using my father's competition license, doing auto tests and grass autocrosses and slaloms and that sort of thing. By the time I was 16, 17, had then had a sort of road race car, which I drove to sort of sprints and the odd race on, but it was a road car, and then it basically was how could I go motor racing? How could I afford to do it? So it normally ended up we'd do a couple of races, something would break or I would crash. I would then run out of money, and I would sort of hang around for 6 months, getting the budget together, repair the whatever it was, and then off we go for another 2 or 3 races. My father was great. He would give me all the time I wanted or needed, and he was very smart. Actually, he was a great engineer, so he would help me with the car to early hours of the morning, but he would never pay for anything. He would not give me any money, which used to frustrate me. He certainly wasn't rich, but he could have certainly have afforded to help me a little bit, but he
Sure.
wouldn't. He wouldn't do that. And I sort of sitting back now at the end of my career, I don't, begrudge that. I think it was the right thing to do. It certainly made me work a damn sight harder trying to get there by myself, by ducking and diving. And the good thing was, I suppose, in the early days, I was able to duck and dive and earn money and go motor racing and go out and have a girlfriend and do everything that he said I couldn't do. He said, you need to pick one or the other. You can't go out every night, have a girlfriend, and go motor racing. Pick one. So obviously, being a teenager, I totally ignored that and carried on the way I was going. So it was a good upbringing the hard way, but it made me sort of more determined to get there, which obviously eventually I did. But it was before 82, there was 10 years of club racing. From sort of 71, it really kicked off with special saloons, and then that was all about money. So I binned that, and I then went one make racing. So I did a mini couple of years in mini championships, and then I did a Fiesta championship, and then I did a Metro championship. And every championship I picked, it was a new championship. So I figured to pick the Renault 5 championship, one make championship that had been running for years, to suddenly catch up and learn all the tricks they were up to, I was in too much of a hurry. So I picked new championships. And despite what John Glenn said earlier, I was technical enough to get my car better than everybody else's. So every new championship I did and I picked, I won. But also I picked the ones where there was a prize. And those 3 that I've just mentioned, there was the Mini was a brand new 1275 GT for winning the championship. The Fiesta was a brand new Fiesta, obviously road cars, not racing cars, and the Metro was the same. So that was helping fund my motorsport before it sort of finally started to kick off in 81, 82 with Austin Rover.
Right. So that it was just a tale of, well, just working hard, grafting, and basically paying your way to get there, and obviously working, and every time any money came back your way, it was reinvested, and that's how it
and then
kind of grew from there.
When I left school, I worked for my father. He had a small little garage selling batteries and tyres and tracking cars and stuff like that. And then eventually, after about 4 or 5 years, bear in mind I left school at 15. So after a few years, I stopped working there because we used to fight a lot and argue and criticise each other. So I then went and started in the motor trade, basically buying cars from the trade and selling them to the trade, and
Right.
that was very successful in funding my motor racing from late 80s to late 70s to early 80s. I could work 3 or 4 days a week and then spend the rest of the time on the racing car, preparing it and doing everything I wanted and earn enough money to go motor racing. So the early part of the motor trade back then in the late 70s, early 80s was very good.
No, excellent. It's sort of seems to be the business to have been in around that time, which is obviously stood you in good stead. How obviously there was that sort of work ethic and earning your way into various series. How did the move into like the upper classes and up into the BTCC initially come about, or the it was the British Saloon Car Championship, wasn't it?
Well, an awful lot of luck and being in the right place at the right time. I was had a I was getting started with Austin Rover, and when I won the Metro Championship, they basically wanted to make an example of the winner, and it was a big marketing sort of campaign that the winner of the Metro Championship, this is what we're going to do. So they gave me a contract and gave me a little tiny bit of money to go Group One racing with a Metro at the time, which was in the baby class, and they basically at the time Richard Longman was running the factory cars, and he had data post on the cars, Esso, Hepalite, and something else. And I remember hearing that John Davenport thought the cars looked a bit like a Christmas tree. There was too many sponsors on them. So luckily I had my ear to the ground, and I started courting Hepalite Glacier, which was a bearing and piston company. And suddenly they became interested in me. Then Austin Rover didn't put them on the car on the data post on the factory cars. And in between Austin Rover deciding what they were going to do, I sort of jumped in and made the move. And that was the sponsor, probably the only sponsor I ever got, that got me into the TWR, into the Rover situation. So I think the first year at Hepalite, I got £500. The second year, I got 5,000. The third year, I got 123,000 to do basically with, I could have taken it to another team. I could have run a BMW, but with Austin Rover's help and encouragement, and them still trying to hang on to the steering the Hepalite money, we decided to stick with them and go to Austin Rover stroke TWR, and that put me in the Rover for the '83 season.
Right. Okay. Oh, it's interesting. I I mean, that was quite a jump in the money.
Well, the money, yeah, but it just shows you, you get peanuts, but if you keep working on it, and they wanted it. It wasn't just me convincing them to spend over 100,000. They had their own plan, and I had a great relationship with the guy at the time. His name was David Gardner, and he's passed away, but his son is still around, Mike Gardner, and I still see Mike regularly at Goodwood and other race meetings. So it was a great relationship with Hepalite and with David Gardner. So it was all good. They wanted the car yellow and red, which was a bit banana-ish, which I didn't really appreciate. But at the end of the day, who cares about the colour? I was going motor racing there was a new championship then came out in the UK called Group A. So they've been Group 1, and we started with Group A. And I think everybody thought I would struggle because I was then perceived as a front-wheel drive, one-make champion, and they didn't think I could drive a rear-wheel drive car. So I had a point to prove, which luckily I was able to do.
Yes, I was just going to say. I mean, that first win. That first year, '83. Was that? I think you said you had what, 5 wins and 3 podiums, and you actually won the title in '83. But
For about 6 months.
yes, and then
And then we lost it in a court of law. Good old Tom was up to his normal tricks. In actual fact, it was what he'd done. He basically had upset an awful lot of people on before 1983, and by the time they were out to get him, by the time '83 came and my championship, and they found that I had, instead of having hydraulic tappets, I had mechanical tappet in the car, which gave no performance gain. It was just easier to maintain, but it wasn't legal. And to be fair to the organisers and the scrutineers, it wasn't legal, and we lost the championship. At the time, I didn't care, but years later, you think maybe I'm a little bit more upset about it, 100 years later than I was at the time.
Yes, in hindsight, you're probably a bit, slightly a bit more annoyed. And it was won by Frank Sittner, wasn't it? And
Frank
he took it.
sort of put up. Frank was basically the spoiler. He was after he'd driven for Tom, I think the previous year in '82, and Tom had fired him. They fell out, and Tom fired him. So Frank went off and got a BMW, and then was absolutely out to get his own back at Tom, which eventually he did.
Yes, it took 6 months from the end of the season, but he certainly got there. Just on the subject of Tom Walkenshaw, I've just seen a question has popped up, or a comment from Kay Baker. Thank you, Kay. Says, "Hi Steve, what is your best or worst memory from your time with Tom Walkenshaw?"
I suppose the worst memory was I gave an interview to the press, and then John Davenport. I was employed by John Davenport and loaned to Tom Walkinshaw to race, because obviously Tom Walkinshaw was running all the cars for Austin Rover. So my contract to my boss, if you like, was John Davenport. And one day, John Davenport said, "Look, put down on a bit of paper how we can improve things for the next year, and for the end of the season and for next year." So, like a naive mug, he said, "Just between you and me, won't go any further." So I wrote 2 or 3 pages of what I thought we could do to improve things, and within a week it was on Tom's desk, and I got a call or summons to come down and discuss it. So I was already early on. I was in the shit with him, and then things got worse. I then gave an interview, which didn't go down very well with Tom. They then made a film, promotion movie, where I came across as a little bit of a spoiled person. I wasn't getting my way. That's how the film produced my sort of image, which wasn't quite true. I was moaning and groaning, but the film made me look like a complete prima donna, which maybe back then I was, I don't know. But basically, I was called in again to Tom, and he said, "Look, you've done this, you've done that, you've said all these things." He said, "It's my team." He said, "You might have a contract, but you're going to be sat on the bench, and if you keep your mouth shut and your head down, I might bring you back at the end of the season." So I sat out half of the I think it was 84 season. So that was probably one of my worst moments with TWR. Having said that, I was learning. I was learning about politics. I was being sort of learning. Maybe I was learning the hard way, but I certainly learned an awful lot of what to do and what not to do after that event. And I did get back in the car I think around about September. There was a Donington ETC race, and I ended up crashing it in testing before we even got to qualifying. And I wrote it off. There was a rover, and my foot slipped and got jammed between the accelerator and the brake pedal going down towards Redgate. And the thing cleared the gravel trap and hit the barrier hard, and it destroyed the car. And I was sort of a bit in shock and a bit shaken up. And Tom came to me. He said, "Did you do that on purpose?" So I had to convince him that it wasn't deliberate. But I did continue. But I can't say that at the time, I didn't know that they weren't happy days. They weren't happy days. And when I left, and once my contract was up, I made a lot of effort to leave very quickly and make sure I had a drive, which luckily I was able to get a drive. And then once I'd moved to Ford and then to BMW, I realised that actually the TWR days weren't that good. The experience at Ford was just a completely different level, and then it went another level at BMW.
No, sure. I guess when you go to different teams, you can look back and think, what was good, what was bad, where the different levels were. So we've got some notes here. 1986, you left Rover, went to Germany. How did that sort of move from into German and European racing? How did that first come about? Obviously, you went on to the Eggenberger as well.
Yeah, it was interesting because at the end of in 1983, Hans Stuck came over and did some races. He was sent over by BMW Germany, Munich Motorsport, and he had a decent car, and we had a lot of really good races together. And most of the time, I beat him. And he went back to BMW, and obviously to justify that he'd been beaten, he praised me and put me on a pedestal. So very quickly, at the end of '83, BMW came on the phone and offered me a contract, which at the time was about 3 times what I was earning at Austin Rover. And it was to drive in Europe with either Schnitzer or Eggenberger and be teammates to Stuck or Manfred Winkelhock. And although it was ever so tempting and it was my ambition at the time to drive for BMW, it did frighten the life out of me because I didn't know any of the circuits, I didn't speak German, I didn't know the teams. And John Davenport basically persuaded me. He said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll match the money and we'll give you a 2-year contract. Stay with your friends." And it was easier to stay than the world, in Europe looked quite daunting. And I've never, I'm not one of these people like John Clennon that thinks he's the best driver in the world. I've never thought I was that good. I have to sort of justify to myself that I can win that race. And I don't think I win that race because I'm great. I just think I win that race because the rest of them are not as good as, I'm making mistakes, but I'm drawing away from them. So, I've got to be slightly better than them. So it was a very daunting opportunity to go to Germany and race in Europe, which cowardly I didn't take. So I stuck with Rover, but it was a mistake. So jumping on at the end of the contract with Austin Rover, I then started talking again to BMW, and everything was looking as though I could do a deal with them to join them in 1986. And then over Christmas, it went very quiet, and I was talking to the new boss at the time, a guy called Peter Floor, and all of a sudden there was no communication. It just went dead, and I started getting a panic on because I'd already told Austin Rover I was leaving. And all of a sudden in January the phone rang and it was Ford, and basically Ford said, "Look, we've got a Sierra Cosworth coming in 1987. We're gonna start in '86 with Ford Merca, but that's just an interim car, not the great car, but the Cosworth's coming in '87, '88, and if you're interested, we'll give you a long contract." So I joined Ford. And because basically the negotiations, I wouldn't say they fell down at BMW, but they certainly went quiet. And then all of a sudden, the Ford Cosworth, the Sierra Cosworth looked great on paper. So I joined Ford of Germany and did 3 years with them. And it was a breath of fresh air. It was Rudy Eggenberger ran the team. It was a Ford clone, sort of paid for program, so it was very, very German, but it was enjoyable and good times. There was my teammate, most of the time my teammate was a guy called Pierre Dudoni, and in the other car there was Klaus Ludwig and Klaus Niedzwitz, and it was a good, happy team. Rudy Eggenberger, tricky person.
I'm sure he was.
Yeah, but a racer, an out and out racer. But a control person as well, in the team, with all the team members, all the engineers, everything. It was his way or the highway. But we were competitive. We were fighting for wins, fighting for the championship. So it was a good few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just want to come to that Cosworth soon. I've just seen a couple of comments that have popped up. A couple of people have messaged they've messaged in asking about testing the 6R4 for Williams. And and someone's just where are we? There's been quite a few. It said apparently it's a good story, and apparently you tried to make it look not quite as bad as it was. I've only heard little bits on this, so this is going to be fascinating.
It's funny how you forget things, isn't it? And it's one of those stories that I always forget because it was me in one of my best moments. But basically, Tony Pond was the test and development and rally driver for Austin Rover at the time, and he was doing the majority of the testing of the new Metro 6R4 rally car. The car being built by Williams, and there was one car at the time in I think it was 83. There was only one car. Williams was doing all the test and development. They hadn't handed it over to Austin Rover, and when Tony couldn't do the testing because he was off rallying somewhere, I got called in, and I turned up and would do. Most of my testing was pretty boring. It was just going round and round in circles, on a roundabout, and it's basically it was totally boring. It was just diff checks and stuff like that. On this particular day, I turned up, and there was sort of a tarmac sort of course set where they wanted us to do some, or wanted me to do some quicker stuff. Anyway, cut a long story short, it had been raining the night before. The airfield was dry apart from one corner that had a puddle. And I missed the puddle, for every lap throughout the day and the afternoon. But as boredom set in and I got faster and faster, and I had an engineer, I had a guy called John Piper sat next to me in the car. Eventually, of course, I hit this puddle, and the £1 million, one and only Metro 6R4 left the airfield and went into a muddy field and barreled rolled itself into destruction. And that was not a happy feeling when that happened, partly because I had someone with me and I was concerned for his welfare, but also it destroyed the car, and it took me about 15 minutes to find the left front corner, complete with wheels, suspension, brake, strut. That had gone miles, and the car was all covered in mud. And when we dragged it out of the field, I thought it would look better. It would look far less damaged if I washed it. And I got a bucket of water and started to wash it. And it actually looked worse when I had finished. And then I had to go back to Austin Rover and explain to John Davenport that I destroyed his one and only car. When I got to Austin Rover, his secretary said, "Well, he's not here. He's out at lunch." And I got there at about 1 o'clock, and he turned up from lunch at about 3:30 with a grin on his face, and I was sat there and in the reception, and he walked by me and he grinned and he said, "So you've crashed it, have you?" And I said, "How did you know?" And he said, "I don't know." But he said, "Why are you here if you haven't crashed it?" So I said, "Yeah, I crashed it." He said, "Don't panic. We'll learn something from it." And that was it. I thought I was about to be sacked.
So that could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah. Listen, give me 1 second. I just got an alarm saying I've got a low battery. Let me just plug it in.
No problem at all. No problem. For those of you who have tuned in, I think the cleaning bit was the bit that people were hoping to hear. That was very, very good.
Yeah.
No, excellent. But obviously not a nice feeling. Not a nice feeling, but it seems it was dealt with quite well. Just connecting the power.
See if this works.
There we go. A little bit more power.
Hopefully that should work.
Smashing. Excellent.
Okay, sorry about everybody.
No, not a problem at all. Yeah, there's a few people just commented whoops, and a few people said thank you for telling the story, so that's all good. If we can just come back to the time where I first became aware of you, I'm going to bring the age thing in. I was 7 in 1988, and I remember you in the Cosworth with the Texaco livery and all that.
I missed that. We've got the interference back.
Oh, the interference has come back. Okay, hopefully it's not too bad. Have some minor technical issues. Screen's gone black. We've lost the camera, Steve, but well, looks like Steve has just dipped out for a minute. More technical issues, but we are going to carry on very shortly. That was a cracking story. Some of us will have heard it before, others won't have done. But we're going to get Steve back shortly. Just seeing a few other comments coming in. We've asked a few questions have come in about Steve's favourite time in the BTCC. Hardest driver he's raced against, all kinds of things. A few mentions of John Cleland. We are going to come to that in a minute. We're kind of going through in a chronological order. So we're going to come to the touring cars in a moment. I can see Steve is back, so we're going to bring him back in. There we are. We're back.
Okay, the interference sounds better now too.
No, that's okay. No problem. Sorry about that, folks. Yes, we've just been saying we've gone through. There's a few questions about the Spa 24 hours and the touring cars and everything, which we'll come to very shortly. A lot of people were asking today about the battle you had with Andy Rouse at Brands Hatch 1988 in that fantastic Cosworth. What are your memories of that?
Well, I instigated Eggenberger. I had to persuade Eggenberger to bring a car over. He didn't really want to do it. But I can't remember how I persuaded him, but I think I used Ford of England and I used Andy Rouse and said, look, we can beat him. It's good for you. Because obviously Andy touted for the contract and he went to Eggenberger, not Andy. And I said, you know, he's been saying he can do a better job. So I was really winding Eggenberger really up to come to England. But my motive was at the time that there was a £5,000 bonus for any Ford winning a race. So that was my motive, that obviously that money would go to me. Although when Eggenberger found out about it, he thought he was going to get it. And I had to tell him it was a driver bonus, not a team bonus. So anyway, I persuaded him to come over, but unfortunately he wouldn't, you know, all of his engines were long distance engines for European or World Touring Car. And most of those races back then were 2-3 hours. And my engines, you know, I'd have the same engine for 2 or 3 of those events. So my engines would basically, you know, they were built to run 9 hours plus testing and qualifying. And I could not persuade him to build a sprint engine or give me a relatively fresh engine that we can turn the boost up. So I was a little bit nervous that, you know, could I win, having talked myself into it and having talked Eggenberger into coming over. I wasn't 100% sure that we could do well. And obviously Andy was still probably probably a little bit sour that he didn't get the full-blown factory deal. All he had was the UK deal, and he did want the European factory deal to do a World Touring Car season and then a ETC season. So he was out. He kept building sprint engines with mega horsepower, and of course I turn up with this ETC engine. So life was going to be difficult. We won the first one at Thruxton, and then we went to Brands, and I thought I could win at Brands, but it soon became very relevant or obvious that he had a huge amount of more horsepower, which he kept using down the straight. Then it rained, and I thought I had a slight advantage in the wet. But Andy's no mean, he's a good driver. He's won an awful lot. It's not gonna be that easy to beat him. And it was a good fight. I got a lot of respect for Andy. He is or was a great driver in his day and his time. When it rained, I thought, yep, we've got an advantage. But as the time went on, it dried out. I can't believe how quickly it dried out at Brands. And then on the last lap, I thought I had everything covered, and I purposely got into the lead. And on the straight, the main straight coming down towards Hawthorne, I was on the right, on the inside, which meant that he had to come from behind me, past me, and get completely in front of me to shut me out. And I'd already worked out that he couldn't do that. He could, if he came up the inside, he could make it. He could come from my rear to level with my door, and if he was on the inside, obviously it was checkmate going into a Hawthorne to the right-hander. This particular time I was on the right. Anyway, basically there was a slow flipping car bouncing along the grass on the last lap on my right, and it looked as though it was going to join the circuit, and I had my foot buried absolutely flat out with the advantage, and it got closer and closer and closer to the grass from leaving the grass to come onto the circuit. And in the end, I chickened out. I came off the throttle, and Andy won, and he took £5,000 home, and I went home with a telling off from Eggenberger because there was some white and blue paint on the side of the car. Then I think we went to the Birmingham Super Prix or something, which we only qualified. It was a street circuit round Birmingham, and I qualified on pole by about a second. And then the race, we were the last race of the day, and it was a 3,000 race, and they kept having red flag after red flag after red flag, and that race
carnage, wasn't it? I remember it. It's carnage.
That our race at the end was cancelled. We ran out of time. It was dark. And again, I spent the £5,000 thinking, I was going to win the race, and I was on pole. And we went home again with no £5,000. And then at Donington, the same thing again. Andy beat me, and I can say, oh, well, he had more horsepower and he had this. At the end of the day, he beat me, and it's if button only. It's a pathetic racing driver's excuse. He had more horsepower. It's pathetic. He beat me, and I came second.
But just one of those things. I mean, I do remember. I mean, I was young at the time, but I do remember watching it, and and I must admit, at that time, it was you and Andy and Rob Gravitt, who actually we spoke to before, who I know you're very friendly with, who are like the three guys that I thought, wow, these guys are top guys. So seeing you and Andy going at it at Brands Hatch was fantastic, and I think a lot of people will agree. Just going back to Brands, I see a guy called Robert. He's just said, imagine being able to do all that tactical thinking when driving an RS 500 on the limit.
But
pretty impressive, very impressive.
It's not tactical because at the time that was my job. I was in a racing car probably 2 days a week, every week, week in, week out. So it's 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 it isn't mind. You're so determined to try and win that you're always thinking of what lap are we on, where I need to be on this lap, that lap. The last lap is the important one. So it's and I think, as I've said before, yeah, okay, my car had 530, 540 horsepower, but when you're driving it, I needed 700. And if they'd given me 700, I would have wanted 800. Whatever you've got, it's not enough. Whatever grip you've got, it's not enough.
No, sure. Going to come on to the switch to BMW in '89, but I've just seen a question pop up. It's an interesting one, actually. Why did Mr. Brancatelli have the drive in the final round? Was there an issue was this the issue with the ports or something?
Where in Japan, or which final round? In England.
I think it was in England. He came in and won a race at the end of the season.
It's funny how it's the fact that I only won one race out of the 4 or 5. I have no memory of Brancatelli coming in and doing that. And
Right.
if he won, that's probably a good reason I can't remember. But I really don't remember.
No, fair enough. And I must admit, when I was looking into it, I did spot that, and I'm glad the question was asked. But no, that's fair enough.
Don't know what that was.
It's a suspense building noise. We've got a question that's popped up about Bathurst. We're going to come to Bathurst shortly, because obviously we spoke to John last week and spoke to Rob and spoke to Matt Neal, and they just wax lyrical about Bathurst and how fantastic it is, which we're going to come to shortly. Just want to get on to the move to BMW, the Zack Speed in '89, and then the 3 years in the DTM. How did that come about? You finally joined BMW.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of '88, so I've been with Ford 3 years, and they were good, happy years. I loved it. I loved the European Championship. I loved the World Championship, and then I think we'd done Bathurst and New Zealand, and we were in Australia. The season was just about over, and we were dragging our heels, my wife and I, to come back to the UK. And we were in Australia around about November. And I got a call from my boss saying, look, I want to keep you for the next couple of years, but at the moment, right now, I don't have a budget. And he said, I only have enough money to run one car in DTM. And obviously, if I've only got enough money to run one car, it's going to be Ludwig and Neatsfitz. So I'm just warning you, if you get offered anything, take it. And if you don't get offered anything, and I can find some more money and you're still available come February, March, then we'll talk. So I got on the phone and picked up negotiations again with BMW, and this time they came back, and we set up a deal. There was a new boss at the time. He just taken over motorsport. His name was Karl-Heinz Kapfel, and he was BMW Germany's worldwide marketing director, and he wanted motorsport, and he took it under his wing for himself. And he was a very tricky guy, but I got along with him great. Once I worked out how to get along with him, we just absolutely hit it off. And that was the start of potentially 11 years. I think I then ended up staying there.
Wow, that's not a bad outfit to be involved with for so long. They're quite good, aren't they?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm being unfair, but I think they've sort of slightly, or maybe it's my memory, but they seem better back in the 80s, 90s. It all seems a bit different today. Maybe I don't know enough about it, but they are a fantastic company, and certainly my time with them, the motorsport history and their whole brand was made on motorsport, and it was just an amazing company to drive for. And I thought I was spoilt at Ford, but I was really spoilt at BMW. Whatever you wanted, if they could do it, they would give you, not just with the race car, but in life. They really did look after you. Um, so it was a great time with them.
Sure, sure, and yeah, as you say, they seem to have gone more towards the commercial vehicle side. Obviously, they're doing well in the British Touring Car Championship today, but and obviously we've heard recently about the demise of the Schnitzer
Yeah,
team, which is obviously very sad. And obviously, you were a big part of what they did as well.
yeah. It was. As I said, I had some. I've got some great memories from the Bugatti days and Schnitzer days. Not a fantastic memory of the Zach Speed days, which was my first year. Zach Speed was tricky. Bugatti was absolute fun. Italians and racing and food and wine. Brilliant team to drive for. Um, Schnitzer was ever so professional, ever so organised, great team. Took me a long time to break into that, the Schnitzer part, the family, if you know what I mean. At the time, Charlie had a great relationship with Roberto Ravaglia, who was the sort of number one driver and blue-eyed boy. And then Winkelhock got himself in there. And then I kept trying to get there. And then Chicotto then arrived and he was there. So it took me a number of years to finally establish myself with Schnitzer. But wasn't all bad because Bugatti at the time were just brilliant. And we beat Schnitzer many, many times in DTM and at Spa and other races. We did a great job with Bugatti. I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
while I remember, because this story seems to sort of escape me sometimes, but I was driving a McLaren in 1997 for Schnitzer, actually in the World GT World FIA Championship, which was great, great championship with JJ Leto and the team, and the car I absolutely adored. And it was a completely different animal. The long tail was a completely different animal to a touring car. And I'd been driving it all year, and I got a phone call from BMW saying, you're down to do Macau. Um, they want you out there. We'll organise it. Are you're okay to go? So I said, yeah. And I've been there probably 6 times, and I'd never actually won it overall. I'd won a race. I'd won one race, and the two races go towards an aggregate, and then whoever gets the most points out of the two races wins it overall. So I think one year I won one race and came third, and Biller won the other race and came second. So I didn't win it overall. So anyway, I've got this call. It's the team's Bugatti, and it's my teammate will be Winkelhock, and Joe Winkelhock it's a fantastic driver, and he's hard to beat. If you go back to '93, when everybody thought it was my championship in the BTC,
yes,
Winkelhock beat me, and he beat me fair and square. I can moan I had more mechanical, but Joe on his day, you just cannot do much about him. So I thought, sugar. And Joe's good around Macau. He's flipping fast and he's good. So I started digging, and I suddenly came, dawning on me that he'd been driving for Bugatti that whole year. He wasn't at Schnitzer, and he'd been doing the German Championship, not DTM, but he'd been doing SWC or SWT or whatever it's called. So damn it, he's going to be tricky. Anyway, I turn up. So I had a good relationship with Btcc, driven with them many, many years. But my engineer, Winklock had. So I didn't get my normal engineer because he'd had the engineer all year. And he was there with his car and his engineer. It's now his engineer, not my engineer, because I've gone off and done something else. So I had the other engineer whose nickname was Tortellini that I hadn't worked much with. And they'd given me Chicotto's car. And Chicotto has a very strange setup on his car. Not everybody can drive Johnny's car. So I turn up and I'm already thinking the worst, that I'm going to get blown off here. I haven't driven a Super Touring for a year. I've not tested it. I've not done anything. Anyway, basically turn up, and I go out in the car on the first free test, and I changed one thing on Johnny's car, which is the front roll bar. That's the only thing I changed the whole weekend. And every practice, I was quickest, and qualifying, I was quickest, and I won both races. And what was nice, Joe's a very fantastic driver, but once qualifying's over, the race is over, he doesn't want to sit in the pits, working on the car, looking at the data. He just wants to leave. And I don't have a problem with that. But this particular weekend, he stayed every night until late, trying to find out why I was quicker and how I was quicker. And the best thing about it was not winning, which was obviously, I was very happy winning the overall Macau Grand Prix, as it was called. But it was seeing my engineer. He was more pissed than Joe. He was so annoyed that I just turned up, hadn't driven a car for a whole year, and blown Winklock off. And it's, to tick that box, I hate sort of saying I did this or I did that. That's more of a John Clennon statement than mine. But it was so satisfying. And I sort of analysed it out afterwards, and I think the McLaren had actually tidied my driving style up, and it had actually made me far more precise and accurate, and actually improved me driving in a Super Tourer. I don't think the McLaren had actually hindered me at all. I think it had actually helped me.
Oh,
so, quick story.
Oh, interesting one. Yeah. No, always, and obviously winning in Macau, it's that's sort of a big thing, isn't it? Because what a fantastic circuit! It's on my bucket list to visit.
Yeah, you should go there. It's a fantastic weekend.
I mean, if like nothing else, just to be at the chicane. Sorry, at the chicane, at the hairpin. Just a bonkers corner. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. So yes, we spoke about. You alluded to racing against Joe in '93. There's a very obvious backstep to 1992 here, which I'm going to bring up, and you've probably spoken about 1992 1,000 times.
No,
and I'm going to make it 1,001. Obviously, there was a couple of things happened in '92. I believe the win at Spa, which was obviously there was quite a lot going on that weekend for you, which we'll come to shortly. But the 1992 British Touring Car Championship season, it's gone down, I guess, in British motorsport folklore. Obviously, you were teammates with Tim Harvey, and how did that sort of come about, that move to the BTCC, and how did you feel the season went? Because obviously by the last knockings, you weren't in with a shout of the title.
Well, my priority, BMW, I was told my priority was DTM. And actually, if I could have chosen what to do and had a priority, it would have also been DTM. So I was only allowed, I think I could only do or allowed to do 6 races. The others clashed. So I was always in a support role come the end of the year for Tim or, whoever my teammate would have been. So there was no way I was going to be able to win the championship. And I quite, I quite enjoyed that because I was under pressure in DTM. I was always in the running, up to halfway through the season, and then the DTM thing used to wibble out, and then we would have to support someone else. So to come to England, I'd done it the year before with ProDrive and in that team, and I had been teammates with Jonathan Palmer, and again only did 6 or 7 races. So to be able to do it again with Vic's team in BTC, it was totally enjoyable. There's no pressure. I was allowed to win early on, but obviously once Tim got on a roll and started winning races, then the last couple I was definitely there to support him. And BMW, obviously GB, were hoping BMW were going to win. Germany were hoping BMW were going to win. And I was told, if you can help Tim, please help him. Now, that statement, there's a set of rules in that statement. And I was never told or paid by BMW or anybody to win at all costs for Tim.
Right.
There's a set of rules, there's a set of morals, there's a set of sportsmanship, and I generally do not and would not cross that. I've been around too long to do that. I'll go on a fine line of that, but I won't cross that.
Sure.
I'm going to be a real pain. My battery's still saying it's low, and I've just plugged it into the computer. Let me just get another extension. I'll come back. I'll be 30 seconds.
No problem at all. No problem. We'll be hanging on to here. This is going to be fun, folks. This is going to be a very interesting chat. For those of you who are tuning in, we actually spoke with John Clennon last week. The video is on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube channels. He's given his version of things, and it's all very amicable, but we shall see. Thank you, everyone, for all your comments as well. They're all coming in. I am getting to them. We can see all the comments coming in, and I am making a note of them. Yes, thank you, Robert, for your comment. Cliffhanger. A cliffhanger it is. Perfect timing. We love it. There we go.
Right.
There we are.
Back when it's plugged in, it's got to keep going now for some reason. Hopefully. Sorry about that, everybody.
I've got a little chart. Someone's just said that John Clennon's pulled the plug. There's so many references back to John Clennon here. Goodness me, is it something he doesn't want to hear?
So I'll sort of carry on. And also, I was good friends with John at the time.
He said the same thing last week. He said the same thing.
Yeah. So, and there's a great deal of respect for John, especially in a racing car. Over a pint in a bar, the respect falls down because he's got too much to say and he's a bit gobby. But behind the steering wheel, he's a great driver and he's a decent driver. But the race kicks off, and in qualifying, in the free testing, we were quickest. Tim and I were very, very fast, and we were up the sharp end. And we should have one of us should have been on pole, or we should have been on the front row. And then in qualifying, it rains and it dries and it rains, and we didn't quite get our act together. So we started a few rows down the grid, which was disappointing because the car was absolutely magic round there. We'd done a lot of work and a lot of testing and setup work, and the car was absolutely magic. So first lap, and I'm trying to get my way through to the front because I figured if I can get to the front, I can control the race and help Tim more than I can if I'm sort of behind him or at the back. And I pulled a move on David Leslie, and David Leslie was a very capable, very good driver. and David takes no prisoners. And I was probably a bit, on that line, I was probably right on that borderline of being fair or not being fair. And I lent on David. I sort of muscled my way through. I didn't push him off or anything, but I certainly lent on him, trying to go past him. And I got alongside him, and we turned left, and then we turned right. And I thought, I'm on the inside. So I then started to lean on him, and he was having none of it. And as I leant on him, he came back at me. And the upshot is, I spun, or after contact with him, I spun round, and my next good mate came along, Rob, grab it, and drove into the back of my car, and sort of made a mess of the car. So I'm now stone cold last. The rear of the car was all smashed up. And I'm thinking, that's funny, David's driving a Vauxhall. That wasn't, I had forgotten how fair I'd been on him. All I could think of about poor old me, I've been spun off, and I'm at the back of the grid with the car all smashed up. So I then go after the leaders, and I go from last place, and I eventually catch John, I think John was 6th or 7th. And I went from last to that without touching another car. I didn't even touch, here, I'm here, not a scratch, not a touch on any car. And I passed John, and then at the next corner, even if I say so myself, I carried out a lovely move on John, which I slowed John up coming out of Abbey. And Tim was able to pass both of us. So I'm sat there with a little smirk on my face thinking, right, job done. Tim's now in a championship sort of position. John's behind me. I'll keep John behind me for the rest of the race. Might not be easy, but I'll try and do that, and Tim can go off and win the championship. And at the very next corner, then obviously John carries out his sort of stunt circus act on me, and it goes up over the curb, up on 2 wheels.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, it's another Vauxhall beating me up. And the fact is, if you look at that, which is, you can still find it on YouTube.
Yep.
In that maneuver, John loses his right-hand door mirror. It's gone. It falls off.
It goes flying.
And I think John, got totally upset with me by what I'd just done, allowing Tim past both of us.
Well, there was the reaction where he was going for first, should we say, that we know about with Murray.
And so, and I think John thought I was gone. He'd eliminated me. I was off to the right, onto the grass, going backwards in the gravel. No door mirror. He didn't know I was there. Right. So I'm now coming into the right-hander, and I'm still there on the inside. And it was certainly an error that I didn't want to take John and myself off. So there's definitely an error from my point in going in there. Having said that, if John had known I was there, he wouldn't have turned in with absolutely no thought about me. So he took his ideal line, thinking I wasn't there. Right. I was offline, trying to get back at him, and between the two of us, probably the accident that then occurred, you could argue I was more out of place than John. However, I'm sat there thinking 2 Vauxhalls have had a go at me. And fair. I collided with him, and we both went off. Yeah. Now, as far as all the viewers are concerned, if I'd wanted to eliminate John, I could have done so and made it look like an accident, and I could have still carried on. And I believe I could have finished on the podium. It's very easy to get rid of a front-wheel drive car just by giving a little tip in the right place as it turns in.
Yeah.
I certainly did not want to eliminate John. He was a championship contender, and I certainly didn't want to eliminate myself.
Sure.
As it turned out, I turned out to be the bad guy. John had a few words to tell every viewer who was watching what he thought of me,
Yes.
which I'm still getting called the man's an animal.
There's been comments coming
mates.
in.
Yeah, even a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a sim race, and I wiped out a mate of mine, Dario, and he came on. We were on sort of Discord. He came on the sort of open view of all us mates doing a sim race, and he said, "Yeah, the man's an animal." So I still get called that. So John's lovely statement still lives on. And then from that moment onwards, I was the bad guy. Everyone was out to get me. And, yes, I wanted BMW to win. Yes, I wanted Tim Harvey to win, but not at the circumstances and what happened after that. And the story goes on because nothing was done at this time at that race meeting, but the RAC looked into it and decided there would be a tribunal. Did John tell this?
He did, yeah. He said there was money spent on lawyers, and then there was
the night before the tribunal. I mean, I'd spent a fortune on legal costs. He'd spent a fortune on barristers and solicitors and everything. And on the Monday after the race, I'd gone to the people who did all the television, and the guy was Barry Hinchcliffe, was the TV production company at the time, and I knew him quite well, and I got all the in-car camera, so I got every footage from John, all the footage from David Leslie, all my footage, every angle of that accident I had on video, which was obviously part of my defence. And then we were told about 6 weeks before the tribunal that no video evidence would be permitted. So I thought, so they're after someone, are they? Probably me. Anyway, John comes on the phone the evening before the tribunal, and after slagging me off for 5 minutes, I ask him why he's rang, and he says, well, he says basically, I think they're going to try and take your license away. But he says, I'm worried because if they don't get you, they just want someone to make an example of. And he said, if they don't get you, they might come after me. And he said, it's got out of control, this. He said, I think we should go in as mates and just be best friends and say it was a racing accident. You say you've got no problem, and I'll say I've got no problem with what happened and with each other. And he said, I don't think they can do anything. And I said, well, providing you say it first, because, I'm not going to say it and then you make a face at me and then call me every name under the sun. So
he actually said that last week. He actually said that you wanted him to say it first because he wasn't entirely sure that you trusted him.
Yeah, exactly. And he did, and that was the end of it. They were very upset that they didn't get either one of us. And I have to congratulate John for making that phone call, because I wouldn't have made that phone call. Not because I just wouldn't have done it, because I wouldn't have thought John would have, done what we agreed to do. And I thought John was too upset over it. And we definitely, it was a bit frosty for 9 months, a year, but we're back to where we were today. Same good mates. I talk to him regularly. I ring him up for advice. He rings me up for advice. I sell Volvos. He sells BMW. We're good mates again. It's just it's just a shame that it turned out like that. It shouldn't have done, but shit happens.
No, sure. No, thank you for putting over across your side. I must admit, as I said, you're often painted as the bad guy. I always thought, because obviously we always saw what happened, and he did the stance and came marching over and all that. I think I'm one of the only people probably who looked back a corner earlier when he goes up on two wheels and thinks that was a bit reckless or a bit much perhaps. But I suppose it depends what you're looking for. Sorry, John, if you are tuning in. Sorry about that, but I'm
Well,
always looking at both sides.
I do wonder if I wasn't there whether it would have fallen over.
Possibly, yeah. He was quite a way up, wasn't he?
But then John would say, "Well, if you weren't there, I wouldn't have taken all that curb." So it's listen. It can be discussed over and over and over. The bottom line was that we between us we made a mess of it, and unfortunately he came off as bad as I did.
Yeah, no, sure. But if nothing else, it's certainly memorable. People are still talking about it now. Yeah, someone has just commented that it has defined an era and it's propelled you both into icon status. So there you go. It can't be too bad.
No. Yes, I mean, I think we've discussed it before that and said, unfortunately, I wonder if it helped touring cars in the wrong way, but there was certainly nothing on that weekend apart from BTC, and it was front page, Autosport, Motoring News. It was all on the front page, and I was he was the good guy with his white hat, and I was the bad guy with my black hat, and his choice words afterwards. The story lives on. What is it now? 28 years?
It'll be 29 this year, won't it?
Yeah.
Crikey, that doesn't seem possible. But yes, it was one of those incidents. I just saw something actually, just moving on from 92. Very quickly, how did the 94 car compare to the 93 car? And do you think that without Alfa Romeo and their aerodynamic wing and all that, would you have had a chance at the title?
No, the 94 car suddenly gained 100 kilos. So we were already heavier than the front wheel drive cars in 93. And then we were given a load more weight for the 94 season, which basically put the BMW 100 kilos heavier. I think I'm 99% sure that in 94 we were 100 kilos heavier, and that just killed it. It killed the car, it killed the tyres.
Right.
Suddenly the car was not competitive. And that's another reason we knew this was coming, and that's another reason I jumped to Japan then. Again, in 94, I was only doing a few races. My main program was Japan. So for 94 and 95, I competed in the Japanese Touring ST, whatever it's called, Super Touring Championship, which I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know if I was going to enjoy it. I went there for two reasons. Basically, it was BMW wanted me to go there. They offered Emanuele Pirro was with us at the time, and he refused to go there. So then they knocked at my door, and I negotiated a very nice deal to go there, on top of what I would have normally been paid. And having turned up and got into it after, I loved it. I thought it was the best racing. I just loved everything about it. Not necessarily getting from Tokyo Airport to some of the circuits on the trains, and back then there wasn't many English signposts and directions, so that was quite difficult. But the actual racing, and the food, and the general motorsport people and what went on was great. And there was a great little contingency of Europeans at the time. There was myself, there was Justin Bell, there was Anthony Reid, Andrew Gilbert Scott, and Tom Christensen, and Mikkel Krum was there as well. So we were this little European community, just great fun, great racing, great sportsmanship. They would let you drive around the outside of them at a fast corner, and they give you room. doesn't happen in BTC or
No.
DTM. So I did 2 years. 94, we nearly won it, and we lost it at the last race. And then I went back in 95, and we did win it. And it was also a remarkable achievement by Snitzer, because they didn't have any premises, and they ran the cars out of a truck, and they would turn up a week before the next race, and they would prepare the cars at a truck at a circuit somewhere, and we would then turn up. So no workshop, nothing. The cars never went back to England, to Germany, unless they got damaged or crashed. Engines went backwards and forwards. Spares went backwards and forwards. So They did 2 years like that, and to be fair to them, they didn't travel as I travelled. They travelled in sometimes difficult um, circumstances and difficult environments. Did a fantastic job, absolutely brilliant job.
Brilliant. And obviously that year, you were the champion.
Yeah.
Champion 95. Obviously 1995 as well. You had the win of the 24 hours of Spa alongside Joe Winkelhock and Peter Cox, which someone mentioned previously. Just want to go back to the Spa in '92, that weekend. Was this the weekend where there was some family stuff going on at home as well that was quite big?
Yeah, my wife was pregnant with our first daughter, and about a week before I left for Spa, she said, "Oh, I think I'm got contractions," and she went into hospital and then came out. It was a false alarm. So anyway, I go off and to Spa, and keeping in touch, finding out what's going on, and then suddenly after qualifying on the Friday evening, she says, "Right, I'm in hospital. I've got contractions. They say it's coming." So I got on a plane and I flew back. Had to get permission from Btcc. So I flew back Friday night to London. We sat there, and she looked like she was in a spa. She didn't look like she was about to give birth. She looked as though she was enjoying every minute of it. And at about 10 minutes before midnight, I said, "Look, if you're gonna have this baby, you need to do it. I'm not sitting here all night. Normally I would, but you need to get on with it, because I've got a race tomorrow, and it's not a 2-hour sprint race. It's a long race, and I don't like 24-hour races at the best of times. They take too much out of me." So to be fair, within 20 minutes, actually, after that, 20 minutes, half hour, I had a baby daughter called Cassia. Flew back to the next morning, early in the morning, flew back to Belgium, got to the circuit. We started the race, and Snitzer led the race for 21 and a half hours, 22 hours, and we were second. And we went round and round and round, and we had a problem in the night, and we were pit stop out of sync. So it looked as though we were nearly a lap behind. In actual fact, we weren't, but it didn't look as though we were going to win. Anyway, I was in the car for my last stint. After me, it was Michel Martin was about to get in, and then the race would be finished with Christian Danner behind the wheel. So I'd already worked out, done my last stint. They're going to do the next 2 stints, and the race is over. We finished second. I've done this race 9 times, never won the damn race. Not going to win it again. Going to go home, see my wife and new daughter. So I get all my horrible kit off, which we got 3 or 4 pairs of overalls, but they're now all soaking wet and sweaty and disgusting. All the underwear's the same. So I shower, shave, wash my hair, get my civvies on, and come to the team, and I say, "Right, see ya. Maybe with a bit of luck, they might break down, and you might still win." And my boss says, Gabriele Raffinelli, Btcc boss, says, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, home. I've done." "You're not going home. You're doing the last stint." I said, "I'm not doing the last stint. I've just got out of it. I'm not getting back in it. We can still win." So, and of course, I've heard this. They're Italian, so you can have a Conrad and 3 wheels and no roof on it, and they still say they're going to win. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have this heated discussion, and basically he wins and I lose, and Dano isn't getting in the car at the end. I am. So off I go, put all my horrible sweaty overalls and dirty damp underwear on, get back in the car, and by the time I get in the car, I am not a happy person.
Mm.
So I'm now thinking, right, well, I'm going to drive the wheels off. I mean, even back then, you drove flat out. You never looked after the car. The car was made and designed. You drove flat out. There was certain things you wouldn't try and break it, but you could drive it flat. So I get back in, but revs were a little bit down for 24 hour. These engines used to rev to 9.5, 9.6, 9.8 sometimes. A long distance engine was a little bit less revs. So I get in anyway. That's it. If we're going to come close, I'm driving the wheels off this. I'm revving the life out of it. Every curb that I would try and stay off, I'm just grillering the car straight over the curbs. And before I got in, Raffinelli had said, they're a fuel stop out. We don't need to save fuel. We don't need a fuel to the end. Once you've got in, the hour and 20 minutes that you're in, you can go. They have to come in for a splash and go. And I took all of that with I've heard that 1,000 times. So I didn't really. All of a sudden, I noticed they're slowing down, and as I go by, they're still got the board out for Vanderpool, and it's put on the board. It says fuel slow, and then it's got 6,800 RPM maximum. So they're trying not to do the next stop. Now, poor old Eric has been in the car he's done a double stint at the end, and he's Belgium. He wants to finish the race. He wants to win the race in the car. So he's been in the car a long time. And whilst he was allowed to do what he wanted, he was quick. Once they tried to slow him down and conserve fuel, he lost all his rhythm. And he just got very slow. He was completely worn out, and he just took the edge off of him, and he suddenly dropped it. And all of a sudden, I was catching him 10 seconds a lap, 15 seconds a lap, and all of a sudden, I had him in sight. And once you've got someone in sight at the end of the straight, then my lap time went down another second. Anyway, basically, kind of long story short, I caught him out on the penultimate last lap at the bus stop, and I muscled my way by. I certainly didn't push him off the track or anything, but I muscled my way by and got in the lead. And actually, he then came back at me on that last lap. He suddenly woke up to what was going on and got maximum concentration. And he came back at me, but it was too late. And after 9 attempts, we won the Spa race on the same weekend that my daughter was born, which was a great achievement. And also, then we celebrated, and we rostrum and podium and everything, and champagne. I got changed, showered, and then got back to the team to say, right, I'm off. And then, of course, they were still celebrating. There used to be a horrible old muddy pond in the middle of the paddock at Spa, and I got then chucked into the muddy pond with my second set of clean clothes on, and then had to go and shower a third time
Go again
before I could go home. So, but it was a great event, great thing for Snitzer and for Btcc. Snitzer actually said that towards the end they got hold of Paul Rocher and said, look, this is going to end in tears. Just put a board out to tell them to hold positions, and he said, no, it's a race, let them race, which I thought was great. So, yeah.
That's not a bad weekend at all in the end.
No, it was good.
No, very good, very good.
I remember you mentioned Bathurst before. I did Bathurst I did Bathurst many times with Ford and BMW with people like Tony Longhurst and all sorts of people. In 87 or 88, 87, we won Bathurst with a Sierra. And again, it was one of these funny races. It rained and it was such an easy race. I couldn't believe what was going on. They were all crashing and going off everywhere. And we managed to win it. And then on the rostrum, there was Pierre Dodoni and I standing up there. And they booed us and threw things at us and chanted, "We want Brock." Peter Brock had finished second.
Yeah.
And it was quite frightening, with this great big crowd, because it's such an enormous event. And they started throwing beer cans and all sorts of things at us and booing us and chanting that. I tell you what, we got off there pretty quick. But that's another race. I think we won it for 6 months, and then good old Eggenberger, they didn't like where he put the wheel arches, the little stick-on plastic wheel arches. They decided he stuck them on 3 mil too low or something, and too high. So we lost that one.
Oh, so you mentioned about the fans booing you at Bathurst. I mean, obviously, John mentioned this last week. He said he broke down up on the mountain, and all the Aussies were having a go at him, all that kind of thing. And we spoke to Matt Neal as well. He said the same thing. He broke down over the mountain, and he was either in a Ford or a Holden. I can't remember which one it was. And there was the opposing fans were just the other side of the fence, and they were throwing full beer cans at him.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, there's hatred when an Aussie's throwing a full beer can at you."
Yeah. Well, I've been, I don't know how many times, 7, 8, 9 times. But if at their best, they'll throw a full one at you as you're driving past. And if one of those hits the windscreen, I mean, it never hit my screen, but it hit another European, and shattered the screen. This is in the race, not in practice. I mean, they are a special breed. I mean, they banned alcohol, and then they used to turn up the week before and dig a hole and bury it up there, so that on the race day they could dig it up and still carry on
And
drinking.
still have it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to go to Bathurst, but I think I might stay on the flat bit, stay off the mountain, away from the nutters. Just moving on very quickly. A couple of people have mentioned 97 when you had co-drivers with JJ Leto and Nelson Piquet. There's some 2 pretty good names there. What were your experiences of being alongside them?
Well, that year with the McLaren was a fantastic championship to do. It was a World Series, and I'm now old, retired, still for my stupidity, still messing around with historic cars and racing those. But I've definitely had a privileged career, and I do appreciate what I've been able to do. However I got there, whether it was luck, whether it was judgment, whether it was talent, who knows? But I've had this most fantastic, privileged career. 97 was one of the highlights of that career. JJ, I came across JJ in 96 at Le Mans. He was in another McLaren. He was driving with James Weaver and Ray Bell. And that's when I first came across him. And 97 we drove together. He's the quickest, fastest driver I've ever come across in my whole career.
Really?
We had an agreement that at the beginning of that championship that he would start the first race, I'd start the second race. He'd qualify the first race, I'd qualify the second race. And we just take it in turns. After the second race, I said, right, you qualify, you start it. I could not get near him on one single lap or in a qualifying lap or in the wet. And I think I'm good in the wet. I think it's one of my strengths. I think, I've never come across many teammates that were better than me. Some can be the same, some can have their days like Winklop or Perot. But over a season, I'll give them as good as they can give me, or I'll get the edge on them.
Yeah.
JJ, different class altogether. the most amazing car control, the most amazing driver. And the best thing, he was driving him with me in my car. If he'd been in another car, or he was in the other our teammate's car, I would have been right in the shit. So he was very, very good. If you talk about Nelson, the problem with Nelson was his career was over. You know,
Yes, but yeah,
he'd done Formula One. He'd been a world champion 3 times. He was now turning up because his mates were BMW, and it was all a bit of fun for him. I mean, he still wanted to win. Don't get me wrong, but it was not as serious as it would have been 5, 6, 10 years earlier with Nelson Piquet. So yeah, Nelson was still. Don't get me wrong, he was still fast and he was still quick, but he didn't want to drive that night at Le Mans, so that was down to JJ and I. And I hate Le Mans. I just despise the race. I think it's
I've read that. Yeah.
Massive health hazard. I went there the first year in 1983 with no chicanes, nothing, and I was in a Mazda rotary little Mazda C2 car, and I promised myself in the middle of the night that if I survived and I wasn't killed, I'd never ever go back there. And
Wow.
from 82 until 96, I said no many times to good teams. And then eventually BMW said, right, we're going to do Le Mans until we win it. Do you want to be part of it? And it's easier if you know the team and you know the manufacturer and you know the budget and you know they're going to do everything right. And I thought to myself, this is the biggest, this in my world, there's 3 big races. There's Monaco Grand Prix.
Yep.
I'm not really going to win that. There's the Indianapolis 500. I'm not going to win that.
Yeah.
But Le Mans, I could be in the right car at the right time. But as it turned out, when they won, I wasn't in the right car. I was in another car, and I think we finished 5th, and they won it. But it was a great year. It was full of excitement, full of another learning curve. JJ helped me quite a bit because I was driving the long tail like a touring car and hitting curves and using the throttle like it was a pom-pom yo-yo stick or whatever. So he actually said, look, you're just upsetting the car. And if if you can look at some data and he's turning into a car with 20 mile an hour extra speed than you are, the car didn't crash. So it's quite easy if he tells you what to do. You just take a couple of deep breaths, and after 2 or 3 laps, you build up and the car goes around the corner. So, I was able to improve my speed against him. But once he put his head down, it was, in the race, I could match him. And I didn't believe we were, I was an embarrassment. I could, we won. I think there was only one other McLaren that won a race, which was our teammate, and they slightly won it by default anyway because they were in the lead when it was red flag because of rain, and everyone else had pitted and they hadn't pitted, so they won it. No other McLaren won. It was only my car and JJ's car that won 5 or 6 races. So it was. They were great cars to drive, and it was a fantastic year. Le Mans, I did it after I said I would never come back. I did it in 80, 96, 97, 98 and 99 and never won it. So, it's just don't like it. Don't like the speed differential. Don't like at night. Back in 98 and 99, if you, in a prototype or McLaren, in the braking area, if you were passing a slower, like a Corvette, they'd have to brake at around about 130, 140, 150 back in 98, 99.
Yeah.
The stuff we were driving was still full chat.
Oof.
So
Yeah,
we'd still be doing over 200 mile an hour while they were on their brakes.
and they're
So
easing
all
up.
of a
Yeah,
sudden, the speed differential is 100 mile an hour, and if they move or they haven't got it right, what's passing them. It's not an accident; it's a plane crash. And
yeah, it's a catastrophe, isn't it?
to me, that's not motor racing. And certainly at Le Mans, every lap in the race at night, I would swear at another car because I thought he hadn't seen me or he was coming into me. And I just don't think that's me.
Yeah.
I know I've got so many friends that love it. My wife loves it. You know, she thinks it's one of the greatest races to be at, especially if I'm in it or friends are in it. I really, it frightened the life out of me, the place.
Well, no, that's fair enough. I mean, obviously, I'm not a racing driver, and I'm not. But from what you said, I don't think I'd like to be in that
Well,
situation either.
the problem is it frightens me. But if I'm going to go, then I'm going to give it maximum. I'm not. If
Mm,
it frightens me, I'm not going to drive around at 60%. I've still got to drive as fast as I can, and will
yeah.
give it 100%. But I certainly used to get my house in order with everything before, in case I never came back. That's how I viewed it.
Wow.
So,
Wow. That's.
and in the 80s, there was people being killed regularly. Every year,
Mm,
it wasn't unusual to lose someone there.
sure.
With huge crashes.
Was it?
And I think 97 or 98 was the year of the flying Mark Webber and Dumbreck in
Peter
the
Dunbrack? Yeah.
and that's frightening, and you don't know what's happened to them.
Yeah.
Dumbreck, we didn't know for an hour and a half if he was with us or somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was in '97. There was a French lad was killed, wasn't he?
Yeah,
In qualifying, and
yeah, I know.
there was
It's
there was like Joe Gartner in the '80s as well.
yeah, yeah,
But
Le Floss,
mercifully, the French chap was the last one before. Uh,
Le Floss, Le Ross
yeah,
or something. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, look at Alan McNish's accident. Um, when it sort of that was a huge accident.
that was unreal.
And as fast as that corner was, there's faster places on the circuit than that.
Yeah,
So
terrifying.
that's my opinion. Not everyone agrees with me, but you know that's me. I'm still here, so
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. Just one thing that I saw pop up, just going beyond into the '90s. Just a quick run through. It was a question again about the British Touring Car Championship, which we're just going to wrap up with before we get onto a few little fun questions that have popped up. What was your take on the Peugeot 406 Coupe as a racing car, despite the obvious painful ending?
um, it it was really it wasn't right from the beginning. It was too big, too heavy, and the engine wasn't. The engine was the wrong characteristics to get it to perform. The wheelbase was too long. Um, Vic Lee was running it at the time. He did as best as he could to make it work. Just would not lead a race. I mean, I led a race at Alton Park, and then the flipping thing had got an oil leak, and then the engine broke. And that, we put so much effort into trying to win a race because Peugeot were desperate to win a race. They said that if they won a race, then they probably France would let them continue and give them a budget for the next year. And we couldn't win a damn race with it. It just would not. Wet, dry, the damn thing was not competitive enough. And I am technical, or I think I am, which is probably very dangerous. Thinking I'm technical, but I thought at the beginning of the season we could get that car competitive and to win a race, and we couldn't. And it wasn't my lack or Vic's lack or any engineer's lack of. It just was. It was configured wrong. It was too big, too long, too wide. The engine wasn't correct. just wasn't competitive.
Yeah, it just didn't work for whatever reason. Yeah. Okay, smashing. No, great. We've got a few little fun sort of questions that I've seen have popped up, which we're just going to sort of wind down with. We've got a few little funny, a few little fun things. Just bear with me. I'm going to go back through some of them. Where are we? I did see one. Bear with me. Apologies. If you could have another drive in one of the cars you raced, which one would it be? There was one car that you thought, I want to have a go in that.
Probably the Williams Le Mans car, the BMW that Williams built, that is prototype, open top, which the car that won Le Mans in '99, and then I did the next 5 or 6 races in the American Le Mans series with it. That's one of my favourite cars. I've driven it since at a Frank Williams celebration at Silverstone and at Goodwood a few times. Just the most amazing car. Lovely engine in the back of it, V12, sort of 700, just short of 700 horsepower, loads of torque. Just a lovely, lovely car. One of my favourite cars.
One of the top ones to drive. Smashing. Like that one. That's really good.
The wish would be, I need to be 40 years of age, not my age now, to drive it. So if I could pick the car to drive again, I would also need to pick my age.
Right, there'd be another couple of factors.
Yeah.
Quick one from a while ago that I saw pop up. Was it more fun to drive a sprint BTC Sierra RS500 race or a European World race?
I think probably the European, the long distance races, that you just get more for your money. The negative of the long distance race, you've got to share the car with someone. So you're always very critical. Well, I wouldn't have done that. Why did he do that? Why did he pit then? Why did he let him pass? Why didn't, however great your teammate is, once you're not in the car with the controls in your hand and you're sitting on the pit, you're more critical. So that's the negative. But I loved the European series. I loved racing in different countries every other weekend. Coming back to England, as much as I wanted to do it, it's still England. I'd been throughout the 70s and 80s. That's all I'd done. Was driven to, Snetterton, driven to Donington, driven to Thruxton. And once you've done it for 15 years, that I want to see new places. I want to see different cities, different racetracks, and going to the Nürburgring, the old North Liver place, fantastic. Going to Spa, going to the old Brno, and then the new Brno. Some of those circuits, they're just mind-boggling. Everyone says, "Oh, Bathurst," and the Dipper and this and the Court, the Kink. Some of these other places like the Nürburgring or Brno are just as challenging, if not more challenging, than Bathurst. Bathurst is lovely and great and not an easy circuit, but it's not the most challenging circuit I've ever been to.
Right. Okay. Oh, you mentioned about Brno in the Czech Republic. I've always said one of the best things is seeing like the MotoGP and the World Superbike guys go around there. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. There in Phillip Island.
Well, that's the new circuit. I raced as well at the old one.
Which is
I
even
did
more
2
bonkers.
races at the old one, which was about 9 miles round and went through villages and outskirts of the town. And that was just, you really did, your eyes were wide open when you drove around there. But they're just fantastic memories and fantastic circuits. But as you say, the Brno that the MotoGP still use, that's a fantastic circuit for long distance or for DTM or whatever you take there. It's just a brilliant circuit.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a couple of BTCC questions I've seen popped up. Kay Baker again. Do you follow the BTCC now? If you do, would you fancy a go in the cars? And who are the top drivers, do you think, in the BTCC?
Yes, I do follow the BTC. I follow it more because I'm quite close to the team dynamics. So I'm very good friends with Barry, who's the sort of race director there. I still know Matt Neal very well. So I am not involved. I know what's going on. I know all the sort of ins and outs, the cars, the politics, and everything. And because they're so into it, and in recent years they've looked after a lot of my historic cars, Lotus Cortinas and Elans they've built for me, and I'm down there an awful lot. Then that's why I'm still following BTC, I would say, and it's good, as I don't like some of the stuff that goes on. However, it's great TV, it's a show, it's entertainment. The drivers, the top drivers today, I probably, what is, in my opinion, there's three. It's obviously Colin Turkington, who keeps winning for BMW. Great for him. I think Ash Sutton is a bit of a star. I don't believe he is like the rest. I think he's got something else.
Yeah.
And I also think Dan Camish is right up there. I think he's very, very, very quick. I just read that he's been dropped and Gordon Shedden's coming
Yes,
back.
Gordon Shedden's come into one of the seats. Obviously, the second seat hasn't been confirmed. We do know what's going on with the second seat, but we're not allowed to say until it's announced. But yeah, Dan's gone and Gordon's back.
So Gordon's back in. I rate Gordon very highly. I think he's a terrific driver, and I'm sad to see Dan go, but I'm pleased that Gordon's coming back, and I think Gordon's got a point to prove. Because he went off for World Touring cars, whatever reason, it didn't really work. So I'll be interested to see how Gordon gets on, and that's about it really. In BTC, I don't go to many races. I probably go to one a year, but I do. I don't break the speed limit to get home to watch it. But if I'm certainly in, I'll play it. It will be on the TV. I don't. In my world, it's not as what it was in the 90s.
Sure.
Early 90s, late 90s. However, the last couple of years of the 90s, they were spending, 8, 9, 10 million pounds to win a championship. And it's, I think you can run, I think it's about £1 million, 1.1, 1.2 to run two cars now in that championship. So it's still expensive, but it's, with sponsors and unfortunately, there's a lot of paid drivers, which I don't like the sound of, and that's not anything against the paid drivers, but it just had a better feeling when, back in the 90s, nearly everyone was paid, and nearly, they were employing the best drivers there were for touring cars in Europe or in the world. And it was great when we had world touring car events, one-off events, each year, and all the best of the best.
They were great.
Yeah, the best of the best got together. Drivers past BTC. I rated Ivan Muller. I rated him when I came across him back in the early 90s when he was at BMW, and I still rate him. He's still driving and racing today. I think he's a huge talent that always gets the best out of a car. And Rob Huff, I think he's right up there again.
Yeah.
Why can't we have, the Dan Shedden, Rob Huff, Muller, Plato, and that caliber of driver, the Matt Neals, Ash Sutton, and a few Europeans like we used to. I know why we can't, but
it'd be great to have
I
them
don't know.
back.
Yeah.
Because obviously, Ivan Muller's still doing the World Touring cars. He's still
Yeah.
out racing, isn't he? And he's still right up there with Cyan Racing is up there
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
well.
And
With his
also
nephew,
Andy
Jan.
Clio, you know,
And yeah,
if you think of the drivers that you could get, I wouldn't say if you had an open checkbook, but certainly if you had a tiny bit of money and you could tempt some of these drivers back into BTC,
it would be awesome.
or even a one-off event.
Yeah,
I'm sure Dynamics would run 2 cars for a couple of so-called superstars at a one-off event, a
yeah.
BTC, European world event. Bring some Aussies over, bring some Italians and Germans and Belgians and some Brits and let them. But someone
Just let
organised
them go.
it, so we've got a World Cup type event.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I think a lot of people would love to see that. I certainly would.
Yeah.
That'd be terrific. I've just seen that your daughter's put a little comment on. She likes the Portimao circuit. Cassia has just commented she likes the Portimao circuit. So yeah, hello.
Yeah, you know why she likes the Portimao circuit? Because she goes to all the karaoke bars with all the boys, and
She's put a little.
drags them in. My technicians, engineers, mechanics, she drags them in at about 4 o'clock in the morning after being karaoke and drinking all night.
Well, on her comment, she's actually put the little beer glass, little emoji thing. So yeah, there you go. Fair play. Just a few very, very, very quick ones. We're going to wind it down. You've said that you prefer the longer races to the shorter ones. Rob Gravitt, this was a while back. This was last year when we spoke to Rob. He said that you're the one driver that he would trust going door handle to door handle with down Craner curves.
That's nice of him.
Who would you be, and would it be Rob?
No, but I like the fact that he would trust me. so obviously I've left an impression that he would trust me, which is all I need to do. And then whether I behave myself or not. I mean, generally, I wouldn't. I'd give anyone. I'd personally try and give anyone room. I wouldn't give them the corner, but I wouldn't want to, let's say, understeer them on purpose wide onto the grass. So the problem is a lot of the people today you can't trust to sit an inch away from your bumper as you go through the Craner curves. I could with Rob. I would trust Rob. And in races past and even today, if someone's right on my bumper, I'll let them by, and I'll decide. I'll sort them out on the last lap. If I don't trust them, I will not let them sit there. I will let them by, because you're just as liable to get spun off or wiped out, and then they come to, oh, sorry, this and this and this happened.
Yeah.
So it depends who it is, basically.
No, sure.
But there's a lot of still people around that you do trust and you can have a good race with, and then there's other people that you think you can trust, and then they let you down. Yeah, they let you down badly.
No, sure. I remember Rob actually said he would also. He said he would normally trust Joe Winkelhock, but he said he's too small to see over the steering wheel. So he would. Two final questions. Who was the hardest competitor that you drove against?
Hardest competitor.
I mean, you've driven against some amazing people, but it could be a tough one.
Tricky. I mean, in touring cars, there's a lot of good people. Muller was very quick. Lawrence, how do you pronounce it? Ayello?
Oh, Ayello, yeah, Ayello, yeah.
Incredible. I came across him in Germany doing STW, and he was driving for Peugeot then, and he was incredibly quick. And then there's people like Ludwig and Chicotto, and I said Winkelhock didn't. The problem is with they just don't. You pass them and you deal with them and you beat them up and leave them sort of in a slight mess, and and then a lap later they're back with you. They don't ever give up, and that's Snyder was very, very tough. So a lot of fantastic drivers that I've come across, and one of my favourite statements was, I'm sure I didn't say this earlier. Tell me if I did. I don't think I'm that good. Yeah, I did say it earlier, but I can be in the lead drawing away and making a mistake at this corner, making a mistake and cursing myself. And I look in the mirror and they're getting smaller and smaller in my mirror. So if I'm not that good, what are they doing? And also another opinion is that if you turn up at a big meeting and there's a good crowd there, there's thousands in the grandstand. I actually believe there's someone sitting in the grandstand that is potentially better than me and a lot of people out there, but has never had the opportunity to show that potential. Maybe he's never even driven a racing car. So I certainly do not think that I'm up there on a pedestal. I worked very hard at getting to a level. I work even harder on getting my car better than everybody else's, because I believe I am able to do that. And I know when the car's good, and I know when the car still needs to have more work done on it to be competitive. So many people just sort of turn up and, the engineer says, well, let's do that. And they agree with it. And the engineer's not quite right and they go backwards. So I need an engineer, but it's we work together and we agree. And if we don't agree, then I get my way before he does.
Yeah, sure. No, excellent. Just going to finish up. There's a couple of lovely comments that have cropped up while we've been chatting here. One of them is a guy, he's tuning in on YouTube. We don't know what your name is, sir, but your name is Mr. E30 on YouTube. I don't know what your name is, but he actually said this a while ago. He said, Steve, I've owned the Auto Art E30 M3 number 11 Soper DTM 1991 model car for over 10 years. Would it be possible if you could possibly sign the box or the model, please?
I think I will willingly sign the box. A fan who actually races, a Belgian guy, Belgium or Dutch, sent me 30 models to sign. He'd emailed me and convinced me that if he posted me these 30 models, would I sign them? He posted them to me. They arrived nearly okay. A couple of them had rattled around in the post and were a little bit damaged. I signed all of them, posted them back to him, and when the box arrived, every single model had gone. So that was a sad moment for the fan. There was about 30 models in there, every single one. The box was fine, but nothing in the box when it arrived.
Somebody had taken them. Wow, that's terrible.
Yeah. So, but yes, he needs to make contact with you, and we'll give him an address, and he can send me the box. Don't send me the car.
Yeah, excellent. Apparently, his name's Robert. So, Mr. E30, Robert. Robert, if you want to email, just email thehardcompound@hotmail.com, and we'll sort something out for you. The final thing, this is just a lovely comment that I saw. It's quite a long one, but this is just a lovely way to end. A guy called Peter Stephen Perrin, who's followed the page for a while. Thank you very much. He says, from a huge John Cladden fan and over the years in the BTCC in general, Steve Soper is one of the greatest drivers to have ever sat in any racing car from any series at any track in the world. And possibly awkwardly from my point, he had the pleasure of saying hello to you at Donington Park at a BTCC round back in 2019, just before the podium. And the name Soperman is very fitting. Some modern day drivers could learn a lot to be as down to earth and fair as Steve.
That's a lovely comment. I thank him. I don't know if it's all true about,
But it's certainly true in his mind, and I think there's a lot of people that would agree.
but I'll take the compliment, and I thank him dearly.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
He didn't say that about John Clennon, did he?
Well, no, he didn't tune in from what I could see. And John Clennon was on earlier, and he's gone quiet. So I don't
He's
know.
gone
We'll
to
see.
bed.
Maybe he's had enough.
Yeah, he's gone to bed.
Yeah, could be. Steve, thank you very, very much for joining us, and thank you for bearing with us through the technical hitch at the start.
That's absolutely fine. I've enjoyed it. So
No, it's been great.
I do apologise about the battery going. I started
Oh.
with 80%, so I don't know why suddenly it was giving me alarm bells. But
Yeah,
anyway, no, it's been fun. It has been fun.
No, it's been excellent, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in. There's been a lot of people tuned in. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for sparing your time, and thank you for waiting as well. But Steve, absolutely brilliant. Really, really appreciate your time. Sorry it took so long. I know we've been trying to sort this for a couple of months.
That's absolutely fine. It's cool.
There was a certain Italian-American guy got in the way, Andretti.
Yeah, no, he's a star. He's a mega star. I mean, if you had a career like Mario's, Jesus, that's.
Oh.
I mean, your last comment, the guy about me, I would say that about Mario.
Yeah,
I mean, just a walking legend.
Yeah, absolute legend. And to everyone who has tuned in, all these videos are recorded, and they're on the Facebook and the YouTube. So thanks very much, everyone. And again, thank you very much, Steve. Really, really appreciate your time. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Steve. Cheers.